Hi everybody, my name is Beth Olson. I am the Water Safety Officer in the Office of Environmental Health and Safety here at Wayne State University. Thanks so much for watching our safety training video as it pertains to our cooling tower and water safety program. The first thing on the agenda today is the review of the OSHA HAZCOM or Right to Know standard, which establishes uniform requirements to make sure that the hazards of all chemicals that are used in United States workplaces are evaluated, and that this hazard information is given to employers and down to potentially exposed employees. And the HAZCOM standard is just a little different from other OSHA health rules because it covers all hazardous chemicals. It has three major components, so the written hazard communication program, which can be found on our website, container labeling on the actual containers of chemicals, and safety data sheets. So chemical safety, just overview of our program. We have roughly 40 cooling tower systems on Wayne State's campus, Med Campus and Main Campus included. Each cooling tower has 4 to 5 chemicals at the controller. That's that blue electronic box that you might see near the chemicals. The chemicals are listed here. We have Stabrum 909 or Trexide 323. These can be two different names for the same chemical because we are transitioning suppliers at this time. Locor TF or Monotrol 2302, Gax 26 or Promex CMT 1.5, AquaClean ODP or Trexide 311 is our chlorine product. We will start by briefly reviewing the label pictograms, which are regulated by MIOSHA and one by DEQ. So there's 9 total pictograms pictured here. The 8 that are regulated by MIOSHA are the health hazards, the physical hazards, and then the one that's regulated by the Department of Environmental Quality is the environmental hazard, which we'll see in a little bit on one of our SDS sheets. So, skull and crossbones, big deal, right? Acute toxicity, super severe. We don't have any chemicals in our cooling tower program with this symbol, but it's important that you guys are able to recognize it. Acute toxicity, irritant, dermal sensitizer, a little bit less severe but still harmful, has narcotic effects and respiratory tract irritation. That's this exclamation point, and we actually do see that on one of our chemicals, that isothiazolone, Promex, or Gax. Probably the most common pictogram in our cooling tower program is the corrosive pictogram. Causes skin corrosion, serious eye damage, and eye irritation. We also have our carcinogen pictogram. You can kind of see a systemic hazard going on here. We have a carcinogen, respiratory sensitizer, reproductive toxicity, organ toxicity, mutagenicity, and aspiration hazard. We don't currently have any chemicals in our cooling tower program with this pictogram. We have explosive or we have flammables. Also important for you guys to recognize these pictograms. And then we have physical hazards. So corrosive to metals. So the symbol's the same. We have corrosive to humans, corrosive to us, serious eye damage, and then we have also corrosive to metals, gases under pressure, and oxidizers. Just a reminder of the different ways that chemicals can get into our system. Don't forget about inhaling or breathing it, ingesting or swallowing by handling a chemical, getting it on your skin or your hands, and then eating some food is a way that you could ingest a chemical. It can get absorbed through the skin, and it can also be injected. If you're handling a chemical in a piece of glassware and the glassware breaks and cuts your hand, that's a way to inject it into your system. They provide you with the chemical and physical properties of your chemical, health and physical hazards, toxicity information, compatibility and incompatibility of the chemical, spill and fire response, personal protective equipment, and much more. Contact your supervisor for your SDS sheets for your workspace. So the first chemical that we're going to talk about is our bromine. It's either Stabrum 909 from Eldon or it's Trexide 323 from Du Bois. This is corrosive to skin and to metals. It is also toxic if inhaled and causes severe skin burns and eye damage. So you want to make sure that you are paying attention to the recommendations of handling this chemical and working around this chemical, making sure that you have the right PPE to work with the chemical, and getting it if you don't have the right PPE. Next is our Promax 1.5 or GAX 26. This one is corrosive to skin and metals. It's also a skin sensitizer, which means that it can actually cause an allergic skin reaction the more you come into contact with it. So you might not notice a huge issue if you accidentally spill it on your skin the first time. You might think no big deal, but the more you actually come into contact with it, the more your body develops an allergic response to it. So you want to make sure that you eliminate any potential interaction with this chemical. So next is our Trexide 311. This is the chlorine or halochlor replacement from Du Bois. We don't have any more halochlor left in the stock room, so you might be seeing these chemicals sooner rather than later at those 7 buildings that have chlorine already at them. This is again corrosive to skin and to metals, and you want to make sure that you are handling it properly and wearing recommended personal protective equipment when you are around it. Next is our Monitrol 2302. This is our low core replacement, so our scale and corrosion inhibitor. This is also corrosive to skin and to metals, so you want to make sure that you are taking proper precautions when dealing with it. The last chemical that we will review is AquaClean ODP, which according to the STS doesn't have any reportable hazards. However, we still want to treat it like the chemical that it is. It is kind of like a soap or a dispersant that is put into the cooling towers, but we still want to be careful when working around it. Finally, just a reminder that our last line of defense with chemical safety is our personal protective equipment for eye and skin protection. Some examples here are goggles, aprons, different types of gloves when handling or working around these corrosive chemicals. Moving on to the second half of our presentation today is Legionella discussion. Here we will review the Legionella bacteria and how it can cause Legionnaire's disease. So some basics of Legionella is it is a bacteria. It is found naturally and in man-made water sources. It can grow and grow quickly when conditions are right. 2 diseases that are caused by Legionella bacteria or Legionellosis are Legionnaire's disease, which you may have heard of, and the lesser known and less severe Pontiac fever. Some risk factors for Legionnaire's disease are listed here. It is an opportunistic disease. Opportunistic means that it more commonly affects individuals with weakened immune systems than individuals with normally functioning immune systems. So, immunocompromised individuals, the elderly, smokers, people suffering from COPD or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, organ transplant patients, persons taking corticosteroid therapy, or individuals who fall under the category of consuming a heavy amount of alcohol, which for men is on average more than 15 drinks in a week, and for women is more than 8 drinks on average per week. Some factors related to contracting Legionnaire's disease can be the level of contamination, so the amount of bacteria that an individual is exposed to. An individual's susceptibility, we just covered some reasons why an individual may be more susceptible to contracting the disease. And finally, the intensity of exposure to contaminated water, so how intense your exposure is to the Legionella containing water. Also, important to note that Legionnaire's disease is caused by the inhalation of aerosols, so not just ingesting contaminated water, but actually inhaling droplets that have Legionella in them. Aspiration of contaminated water into lungs, so by drinking and then perhaps choking and inhaling or aspirating the contaminated water into your lungs could also lead to Legionnaire's disease. The disease is not contagious, so one person cannot give Legionnaire's disease to another person, and it is thought that fewer than 5 out of 100 people who are exposed to contaminated water will go on to develop Legionnaire's disease. Some common sources of contamination can be hot water systems operating below 140 degrees Fahrenheit. We commonly think of showers as our main exposure concern. However, it's also important to consider that stagnant or aged water can contain higher levels of Legionella bacteria. So if we're working around sections of pipe that could be considered dead legs or have stagnant water, they should be considered as potentially having contamination from Legionella bacteria, and we want to be really careful and cognizant of that exposure concern. Also, cooling towers. When the fan kicks on at a cooling tower, we are aerosolizing cooling tower water, which has the potential to contain elevated levels of Legionella that we may aspirate. Humidifiers, also a less common but still very real source of contamination. Decorative fountains, we have a few here on campus, and spas and whirlpools, also a common source of contamination for Legionella bacteria. The only respirator which can effectively filter Legionella bacteria is the N95 respirator. This is an optional use respirator. Use of an N95 respirator around cooling towers is not required. You can contact our office to complete the N95 voluntary respirator form and schedule a fit test for the N95 respirator. Also, you can contact our office if you are going to be working around a cooling tower on campus, and I would be happy to discuss with you the Legionella results at the cooling tower and if there's any elevated concern for elevated Legionella in that cooling tower system. So what's next for our program? We are just going to continue sampling as usual every month for Legionella, at least once a month, and we sample more often if there's detectable levels of Legionella greater than 10 Legionella per milliliter. So the disease, Legionnaire's disease, has an incubation period of 2 to 10 days. The symptoms can range from mild cough to low fever to pneumonia and coma. It's a very serious disease. Early symptoms include being lethargic or tired, muscle aches, a slight headache. Later symptoms lead to high fever, a dry cough, shortness of breath, chest pain, and potentially gastrointestinal symptoms. The lesser version of disease caused by Legionellosis is Pontiac fever. This is a lot like the influenza that comes around every year. The incubation period here is only 1 to 3 days. Symptoms can range from flu-like symptoms, but it is a non-pneumonia causing disease. Full recovery in 2 to 5 days, typically without any medical intervention. I included this slide as just a reminder of some of the requirements we have at our potable water system, our domestic hot water temperatures. Just a reminder to be safe with our new parameters, increasing the temperature that we have here on campus. So we request 125 to 135 degrees Fahrenheit at the outlets, so sinks, shower heads. Automatic mixing valves, we have them mixed temperature being at 110 degrees or less since the user can't control that temperature. And the storage or supply temperature at a minimum of 140 degrees Fahrenheit, with the return being around 130 degrees. Our goal is a delta of 10 degrees or less between supply and return. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me here or give me a phone call. I'm always available to answer your questions and would be happy to further explain any questions or concerns you might have about this presentation or anything else water safety related. Thank you everyone for your attention and time, and I look forward to doing some in-person training as soon as possible.